So lately I've been on about John McNaughton paintings. John McNaughton is an artist. He's from Utah. He's LDS. He's conservative. Well, I think that word is needs to be unpacked, because I wouldn't call him conservative. But that's besides the point here. Anyways, he paints these political and religious and landscape paintings. He's very talented. His paintings are very interesting. Honestly, as much as I critique and analyze them and pull them apart, I thoroughly enjoy it. But I have serious disagreements with him and the message of his paintings. So I've been on about him for a while, and I'm going to continue to complain about him and fold that into my complaints about guys like Neil Maxwell and Ezra Benson and Cleon Skousen, Ernest Wilkinson, and this legacy of Mormon Christian nationalism that I like to pull apart and analyze, and that's tough for some people, and I get it, because this is, meaningful symbols, meaningful narratives, meaningful people, and while it's one thing to entertain the notion that these are fallible people, it's another thing entirely to examine that fallibility, examine where they're mistaken. I don't think that their mistakes make them bad people. I don't think that their errors in judgment, errors in their arguments, I don't think that reflects, I don't think that because Neil Maxwell makes bad arguments that anyone is therefore compelled to come to the conclusion that the church he represents is not true. That's not for me to say. I never had any interest in telling people what they should conclude. And I don't think that anything that I've said necessitates those kinds of conclusions. I don't think that anything that I've said about McNaughton necessitates those kinds of conclusions. But I look at it analytically, and if somebody's going to engage with me, I'm going to continue to do that. But anyways, as I was walking this morning, thinking about McNaughton's paintings and how they fold into this, but also expand on and play with and recreate and reinvent this tradition of, Mormon apocalypticism, and centered around, the end of America and the second coming of Christ. As I was thinking about that this morning, I was thinking about, like, where does my interest, my fascination in this come from? But also, what might be for me a potential bias that shapes my thinking in a certain way, or directs me in a certain way, leads me to interact with sources in a certain way. The word bias is a charged term, and we kind of look at it and think that, like, we should eliminate all bias. All biases are inherently bad, and I don't know that that's true. I think it's important, though, to be aware of biases and to try to understand how they're shaping your thinking, and that way you can try to more honestly interact with what you're studying, But bias, I don't think, is inherently bad. So anyways, I was thinking about, where does my fascination with this come from? And I was remembering when I was a kid. I was maybe 12, 13 years old. Yeah, that's about right, 12, 13 years old. And we lived way out in the country, and we would come to the city on the weekends, stay with my grandparents, and go to church with them. It was an LDS congregation in Ottawa, Canada. And so we would drive the hour and a half, spend the weekend with my grandparents, and then go to church, and then go home Monday morning for school. But one Sunday, we were sitting there, and the way that LDS congregations work is there isn't like a minister who preaches every Sunday. Members of the congregation are invited to speak on Sundays. They prepare what in LDS circles you call talks, and it's just basically a little speech, 5-10 minutes, 15 sometimes, and they members of the congregation speak to the congregation by invitation, and they're given a topic, and they prepare their speech and they give it. And so we were sitting in the back. It was just me and my dad for some reason, but we're sitting back there listening. And I remember, so first of all, you got to remember that I was a weird kid. I was into things that most 12-year-olds are not into. I was reading stuff that most 12-year-olds don't read. I don't think that makes me special or anything, because I, for the most part, had a very adolescent take on everything that I read, But anyways, the speaker giving his talk, and he was talking about the United States Constitution. Now, this is in Ottawa, Canada. These are Canadians, lifelong Canadians. And they're talking about the United States Constitution and its divine inspiration, God's hand in the Constitution. And I was 12 years old, and I was really put off by that. I really took a step back, whoa, what is this, And I asked my dad about it, and he opened up the Doctrine and Covenants, which is book of Joseph Smith's Revelations during his life. And one of these, two of them, but the one that he turned to mentioned the Constitution, and he underlined some stuff and explained it to me a little bit, talking about, what was going on at the time and this kind of stuff. And I still have the book that he underline those in. Anyways, so he also told me about how, Joseph Smith also had his own constitution written. And what he was referencing, I didn't know it at the time, but what he was referencing is the Council of 50 in Nauvoo, and how they wrote their own version of the Constitution meant to replace it, and then decided that they would have no Constitution, that the Council of 50 itself would be the Constitution, which is to say that the government should be run by revelation. So, anyways, I just was thinking about that this morning, and I remember that was my first introduction, really, that I remember interacting with this stuff, and just how it was very off-putting to me, and the notion that God would be a political player really troubled me. And I don't know that I ever resolved that, well, except that now it's a non-issue for me. But yeah, just thinking that's that's where this kind of taking on Christian nationalism bent started for me. And so I guess in a way everything is refracted through that experience, through that lens. And I'm still, even though it's a non-issue from a theological point of view for me, I'm still working out the societal, cultural, political, historical ramifications of these questions, you know.